Hey Storm Nation, Alex Hoskins here with you along with Steve Klemkin, and we're going to be talking about some different surface changes that we're going to be having on some of our upcoming and even existing products in our line.
Yeah, if you look at this High Road Pearl, for example, this is what's been kind of our stock or factory polish finish that we've had for a number of years. And this is, you've been a tech guy, Alex, and a lot of people look at this type of a finish and they would see 1500 grit polished. It would almost be kind of confusing, right?
It was definitely one of the most asked questions whenever you get on a phone call. They'd be like, well, 1500, is that a little bit rougher than the 2000 or 3000 finish? But then it has polish on it, so you can clearly see that it's quite a bit smoother, but it just led to a lot of questions.
It definitely did. So we've actually made a rolling change to our existing product line. So the balls that we've had that were manufactured previously with a 1500 grit polish finish will now come with a brand new 4K fast finish. Why don't you tell us about that a little bit, Alex?
So this 4K fast finish is really designed to have almost the exact same RA value between these two balls. The biggest difference is there is no factory polish applied to this 4K fast. We go from a 360 to a 500 to 1000 to 2000 all the way up to 4,000. So we're not skipping any grits in between each of those steps. So we're getting this surface extremely smooth, just like this surface is, except we're not applying that factory polish to it.
So it's almost a little bit more of a pure finish, you would almost say, because there is no polish or compound or anything on the outside surface of the ball. This is the actual R2S material cover stock, right?
Absolutely. And you're gonna see performance-wise, a little bit smoother breakpoint, smoother transition. It's not going to be quite as sensitive to the friction if you get the ball into the dry a little bit. The shinier they are, they kind of want to change direction a little bit harder off them, where this is just going to still be clean through the front because it's still a very low and a very smooth surface finish, but it's going to come off the end of the pattern just a little bit smoother than something like our older 1500 grit polish finish.
And you talked a little bit about RA. What is that? Surface roughness, right?
Yep, it's basically the average height of the peaks. If you were to look under this or at this R2S cover stock under a microscope, basically the average height of those peaks is going to be the RA value. So the higher that the value gets, the rougher that surface is. That would be something like 500 grit, maybe 1000 grit. You may get up into the 20s, even 30 RA value at some of those numbers. But the RA of this actual ball here is under 5 RA, where on our older finish, it was just about 3 RA. So you can see when we're talking about millionths of an inch, they're not too different between the finishes. It's just this one looks quite a bit shinier because it has factory applied polish too.
And one of the things I noticed, we both competed a lot of tournaments, even in some of the professional tournaments where you see a lot of times the professional bowlers and even the high-level amateur players, they will take and actually knock the surface off of a factory polished ball because they prefer the consistent motion that they would get or see out of a ball where you actually kind of break that cover a little bit. If you have a high speed dominance, if you're a real rev dominant player, for example, even, you're going to see those differences in the oil and the dry more. Sometimes they're too responsive. And this is a finish that we've found actually does create a little bit more of a consistent, predictable motion than what maybe sometimes you would get with this. Now, that does not mean that we cannot get this finish back to this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing that I do want to mention about this finish too is since we're in a very smooth state of the bowling ball and it's purely that R2S cover stock, we can easily manipulate what direction that we want to go. Very easy to get from this back to applying some polish yourself. If you would like to go that direction, you can keep it as is, or you can even scuff it a little bit more. And you don't have to worry about that polish already being on the bowling ball to try and get some of that off. So very easily manipulated with the surface.
Maybe you got this 4K fast finish on your new ball, but you actually want to get it more like the original 1500 grit polish finish. How do we do that?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is this surface is very easily manipulatable, okay? So what we can actually do is just hit our 4K fast finish with a 1000 grit Abralon pad. Now what we're doing is we're actually just putting some surface roughness back into that cover stock. Gets it a little bit closer to this 1500 grit number that we were talking about earlier. Once we hit that on all 4 sides for 30 seconds, we apply step 2 to the outside surface of the ball, and we're going to be very close to our 1500 grit polish finish.
And I've heard a lot of, tour reps, for example, and stuff, better bowlers, they'll actually they talk about getting kind of some teeth underneath and then taking smooth out the top. That kind of sounds like what we're going with here.
Yep, exactly. And that's a really good point that you bring up there, because if we just directly apply polish to this 4K fast finish, there isn't any teeth under there for any kind of traction. So you're going to see the ball go significantly straighter through the front part of the lane. And yeah, it'll change direction hard off the end of the pattern if there's enough friction.
Yeah. And there's a variety of different products that we have, right? You mentioned step 2. There is also a step 1 and a step 3. And we have some reactive shine, we've got extra shine. There's a variety of different products. Probably too many to go over right now. We'll hit up details in a different video. But we've got some options here, and we can still take and make this ball perform exactly how we need to perform, because our styles are different, lane surfaces, lane conditions, everything's different. And that's why you see so many of the better bowlers today traveling around with their backpack with maybe a stack of 6 or 7 different Abralon pads, trying to customize the finish to exactly what they need. And now you've got some other bowling balls that have this 1500 grit polish finish on it, and you want to make these just like this. Can you do that? And if so, how do you do that?
Yeah, very easy to do. Lots of steps is the only thing, because we really want to get all of this polish off. So we're going to start extremely rough at a 360 grit Abralon pad. We really want to cut some teeth into that.
We talked about some teeth.
Yeah, make sure that we get all of that polish off of it. And then we're literally not going to skip any steps going forward. And I think that's the biggest difference between the 4000 finish and that 4000 fast finish. On 4000, we are skipping some steps, so we do have some teeth underneath. But for 4K fast, we're going up literally not skipping any steps. So we'll start with a 360 grit, go up to 500, then up to 1000, up to 2000, and then finally we'll hit that with 4000. That'll be on all 4 sides of the ball for 15 seconds each, and that's going to get you that very smooth 4K fast finish.
So it might take you a little bit extra time because there's a lot of steps involved, but you can absolutely do this and get to this step even if you're starting from here.
Yep, absolutely.
And you might be wondering if we're going to be continuing on with the 1500 grit polish finish in the future. Alex?
Yeah, the short answer to that is yes, you will see some other smoother form of a bowling ball in the future. You may see something like 5K fast, 6K fast, 8K fast, something like that. But at the moment, this is going to be our smoothest surface finish that we offer out of the factory today.
I think 4K, people a lot of times understand 4000, but we have some other balls that are prepped to 4000, right?
Yeah, so the biggest difference between the traditional 4000 and that 4K fast number is, yes, they're both, the final grit that's used to sand it is 4000, but the steps to get there and those teeth underneath are a little bit different. And that's where that fast term comes into play. If we're not skipping grits and we're going through all of those grits, we don't have as much teeth underneath, so that's going to get the ball to go further down the lane and change direction much faster off the end of the pattern. Now, it may not be as fast as something that's polished, but like we said, we do have products that we can apply to that to help maybe even make that transition happen a little bit faster. But the biggest difference is skipping those grits. You're going to see a much faster transition out of this off at the end of the pattern than you would our traditional 4000 Abralon finish.
And I think that's something you guys have done a great job communicating. I mean, yourself, the tour reps, our whole tech team talking about the difference between a ball that's either a faster response or a slower response, right? And my take on that is that we're looking at, when I'm watching the shape of that ball go down the lane when it sees the break point, is it a more angular shape or is it a more of an arcing or a smoother shape, right? Like a curve, a gentle curve versus a more angular, abrupt change of direction. So that's what we're talking about with fast and slow.
Right, and the more that we skip those grits, the slower that we're going to make that transition, the more smooth it's going to be because of the extra teeth that are underneath that cover. If we don't skip any grits, we're going to be much more like this fast finish, and you'll see a much harder change in direction off the end of the pattern. All right, we have explained everything about this running change that we're going to be doing from this 1500 grit polish finish to the 4K fast finish, but of course, you're going to want to see these balls go down the lane and what differences in performance that we're going to see.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the differences in terms of finishes, polishes, compounds that we can apply to this. And I think the next step is going to be changing those, getting somebody to demonstrate those differences on the lane. You know, one of the big advantages we have here is the ability to use Specto, which accurately identifies the difference in brake point position, shape. We can see different entry angles, a lot of different great information. We can see how this actually will be changing and affecting the ball motion, so you can dial in your ball to do exactly what you want it to do.
Yep, so we'll have that in our next video. And as always, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to us, tech@stormbowling.com. We have a full-time technical team here who's always available to help you and assist you with any questions or concerns that you may have. Thanks for watching.